CGC is raising their prices effective January 6, 2025. Now, will this change how you collect graded comic books? Hey there, today I have a comic book unboxing video, and in this video I'm going to open up an order of comics that I placed on the comic book marketplace Atomic Avenue from the seller Parman. And I had this order set aside for a while. It's a pretty big order, probably one of the largest orders I've ever ordered from this seller in particular. And as I was going through the details of the order, I got a notification that CGC was raising their prices. And let me just go over the pricing changes with you for a moment, and then I'll talk about kind of what this means for me, what you might be thinking and so forth in terms of collecting comic books if you were to get them graded by CGC. Now, this announcement was posted December 9th, 2025, where CGC said on January 6th, they will update some of its services and fees for comic books, cards, video games, and home video collectibles, including CGC Signature Series and CGC JSA services, of course, right in time for me to want to submit for JSA, so I'll end up paying a bit more for that. But I want to cover the comic book grading fee changes. The new prices effective January 6th, the modern bulk tier, the fee changed to $27, but the minimum for bulk has been reduced to $25. They keep playing around with this number. The static modern tier non-bulk submission changed to $30. So this is up $3 for the modern tier. And then vintage bulk tier is a new tier. Again, minimum's 25 books, $42 per book. Otherwise, the vintage tier standalone submission fee is now $45. There's high value unlimited. I don't deal with that myself. So if that pertains to you, then essentially all of this is just going up. Everything goes up except our income is the way that I look at it. And there's more information here you can get on the CGC website. Updates to Signature Series. And then what was relevant to me was the JSA authentication. The fee for the JSA authentication services changed to $30. So what does this mean for collectors? Now, the obvious is we're going to be spending more money per book. When you're talking about $3, for me, I typically submit somewhere between 12 and 15 books at a time. That's $36 to $45, just an additional money that has to go to CGC. Of course, I don't like it. I also don't like it because the fair market value of CGC graded comics is going down. They're going to put in your face the Action Comics #1 that sold at a record high, but the commentary from the community has been that it wasn't a CGC 9.0, that it was overly graded in order to get the record sale. So there's always that type of manipulation. And the books that I submit, they're not getting manipulated. I mean, unless my first Gambit right there came back as a 10.0, maybe there's some manipulation there, but it doesn't affect me. It's not part of what I do in terms of CGC having a record sale for an Action 1. The point is that it hurts the average collector again because dealers are going to be submitting in bulk and they're always going to get a price break for that. But for me, that's just trying to collect or upgrade their collection, find raw books at a good price and submit them and so forth, like I have been doing. It's unfortunately just more money out of my pocket. Now, I have to go through now and update all of my spreadsheets, my estimates for cost and things like that. So in this video, if you stay to the end and I show you what, these books that I'm about to open, what their fair market value is, how they might increase in value if I were to get them graded by CGC, my decision engine now changes a bit. And so my margin is so thin in terms of adding value to my collection that even $3 will make or break whether or not I decide to send books to CGC. So that's the first impact other than just spending more money, is that there might be books that I will not send in any longer because it just doesn't make sense. The fair market value of books that I used to submit that were in the $100 and $150 range are now in the $60 to $75 range. And with CGC's fees going up to roughly $30, that does not include your shipping cost to send to CGC and then you paying them to ship it back to you, of course. So all of that's a lot higher. The margin is getting thinner and thinner where your average comic that is in that super high grade 9.8 candidacy, you're just not going to send it in. So I'm not sure how this will impact CGC specifically. I'm sure they'll make their money, but in a way, I wonder if they're doing this because they don't like grading or they don't want to grade so many. They don't want to have books like the ones behind me in a 9.8 hanging on somebody's wall. They'd prefer to have more Action Comics 1 come through their office. It seems silly to me where you don't want to diminish the value of the encased book in terms of like I was going to use the word prestige, but I think that's I don't think CGC is worthy of that word or adjective to describe comics like mine in a case. But I don't mind if the higher end books or the older books command more of a price because those are the books that should require more effort. The books behind me, it's not that they require less effort, but they're just not as important as an Action Comics #1. It shouldn't take your most experienced grader to go through a brand new modern book that was just released. If you're getting all of your absolute Batman sent in and graded, you don't need that level of experience other than you need to just be able to, does this have a spine tick or a soft corner for those modern books? People aren't sending in 4.5s of absolute Batman #1 where a grader has to sit there and just spend their afternoon going over the book. And so that's where I really think a proper restructuring of the tiers beyond just modern, vintage, and bulk, you really should have a recently released submission tier and make it something like $18 because that will make new releases more attractive for CGC grading. And then you could have books like mine somewhere in like the $25 range. And then also, I know it's controversial to say, well, the fair market value is tough because who is setting fair market value and how is it being researched or looked up by CGC? I get all of that controversy, but you could set ranges and say if it's 500 to 1,000 or anything above 1,000 to 2,500 or 1,000 to 5, whatever ranges you want to come up with, you could do that and it doesn't have to be so precise. And I'm not saying to do a percentage, I'm just saying to maybe do various flat rate tiers. And then if it's something crazy obscene, like if it's over 100,000, then do a 3% markup on, I don't know, something like that. But I think that keeping the 1975 to current for all books and then just raising them all up. I don't believe that a grader that you're paying $30 to grade your book, they're just not doing as much work on a Tomb of Dracula from 1975 that may or may not be in this order as opposed to a brand new 2025 Jenny Frison variant cover. They're just not. And to charge the same amount of money is ridiculous. But I've covered the impact of it costing more and how I may not get specific books graded. The other impact to me is that anytime CGC decides to restructure their fees or raise prices, it makes me want to consider buying slabs outright. It's so expensive to get a book graded that you start to look at books in that $30 to $50 price range and you're like, yeah, I mean, for all of the shipping and all of that the original owner had to deal with, you're probably, a fair estimate is probably around $40 for a book to get graded. I've had a couple of books recently end at auction from my comic shop, and I know one in particular sold for $29. And, that's just a complete loss. Not only just a loss of money, but just a waste of my time. And I have to get better at this, right? I can't send CGC $40, let's say, between all of the various fees and costs involved, if the graded comic itself is going to sell for less than that or be worth less than that. I'm all about adding value to my collection over time. And one way that I've been able to do this is to get books graded. And so I definitely am going to take a look at already graded comics to add to my collection going forward. And frankly, if some of my slabs are selling at my comic shop for under $50, so are other people's comics too. So it might be an interesting buying opportunity. The last thing to think about too is, does raising the prices actually increase the value of the slab itself? Because it's costing me more money to grade my comic than you would think the fair market value just went up across the board $3 per slab, right? And that it doesn't. That's not how it works. The fair market value is, it's a complicated thing. It's a complicated question and problem to solve. It's something that I'm trying to do with my data platform and my app is like, how do you actually quantify fair market value? How does it make sense? What types of events influence prices, not just COVID, but other things, scarcity, census value, whether or not it has a dark cover or a light cover, all of that kind of stuff, like which of those impact the books and which ones are kind of a myth. It really comes down to just timing and who's interested in the comic, who's the buyer, how much money does that buyer have. So there's a lot involved in terms of fair market value. And I don't believe that we've ever tracked the moments where CGC has increased its fees, and does that impact the fair market value of a book? I would say it doesn't at all. And so that's also kind of strange to me, is that as we watch books get to the point where they're just about losing everything they gained during COVID, and some sliding even further to kind of like that pre-2021 price spike, CGC's back there just raising their fees and telling you to pay more for it. And so it's just a little strange. And I would like to understand the philosophy behind it, other than it's getting more expensive for them to get materials or whatever. But like, the average comic book collector is not out here getting a salary increase at work. They're not seeing people coming in from sports cards or crypto and helping raise values of comic books by buying them up and adding to their collection. Those days are gone. There'll be some immediate backlash, like I'm never submitting books to CGC again. You'll see a lot of that. Probably a lot of videos with people rubbing foreheads or doing this and things like that. And I will continue to use CGC. I will just be a little bit more selective. But also, I've done this in the past where particularly signature series books are one of the best ways to add value to your collection if you're buying them already signed. Especially at auction, it's crazy when you see a signature series book. It's like the cost involved to get all of these great creators to sign the book and for it to come back a 9.8. It's super expensive. And if you're getting your own book signed and slapping the yellow label on it, that's great. But if you're looking to do it as an investment, it's really tough. I mean, there could be like some formula where you're like, well, if this signature gets on the book, maybe it goes up, maybe it 2x's the book or 3x's. Like Todd McFarlane might be one of those, right? But there are other times where if a creator is announced and they have a signing fee of like $85, you can go find CGC Signature Series 9.8s with that creator signature for $125. And so you don't have to wait, you don't have to risk or gamble, you don't have to hunt a book down and pay $40 for it, plus all of the other stuff, and you end up spending more than that. So I, in the past, have always targeted Signature Series books, and now I might just include Blue Label as well. This was a bit more of a rant than I had expected, but I think it's timely with these fees. It does impact me just because I do count every bit of money that I'm spending, whether it's with CGC, pressing, shipping, buying, paying tax on books. I track every penny because I want to know how much money I've put into a book, because I want to understand, for the condition that it's in, do I want the book to continue on its journey through this process, or do I just cut it off and keep the book raw? we're going to look at this order of comic books finally from the seller Parman. He's one of my favorite sellers on Atomic Avenue. I've been holding on to this order for about a year, as one does. And I'm going to show you the books that I picked up from him, and then stay to the end and we'll run those numbers in the order summary so you can see what I paid for the books and if my total cost for those books line up with fair market value. All right, here we go. Here is the order that I placed from Parman on Atomic Avenue, otherwise known as Rocky Mountain Books. He always includes the sticker, "Do not drop, handle with care." And yes, it was shipped January 6th, 2025. And as I mentioned before too, one of my larger Parman orders, so ended up taking 2 boxes and actually taping them up together. So let me go ahead and get all of the comics out of these 2 boxes so you can see what I picked up from Atomic Avenue. Okay, I took a little bit of a shortcut through those 2 boxes and just sliced the back of the poor backing board on this. And at one point, I think I ended up even slightly bending the comics and I had to stop. So I was trying to take a shortcut, and it's just a lot of tape involved. It's well packed, very cool. Everything arrived safely. It's tough. Like, where do you start cutting? Because everything is scotch taped together. And so if you cut along the side, you're ripping into the spine. Anyway, it's always kind of a ordeal in a production to cut through some of the wrapping. But here they are. Here's the 2 stack of comics. The first one I noticed doesn't have a backing board, and this is usually because Parman includes a free book, and this is Namor the Submariner, number 48, part of the infamous Star Blast crossover, and Thing is grabbing Namor's head. But always appreciate a free book. Parman has been doing this for years where he throws in a free comic. All right, the first one is a great start. This is Uncanny X-Men 268. This is the cover by Jim Lee featuring Wolverine, Black Widow, and Captain America. And I have been after this book in a 9.8 and can only seem to get it in a 9.6. So this would be one of those situations where, is this book worth sending through the process? Now this one, yes, it is. In a 9.8, it has really nice upside. 9.4, 9.6, not so much, but this looks to be a really, really nice copy. Just slightly miswrapped where you've got the darker ad wrapped around the front, so that's not going to help anything in terms of spine ticks, but really nice copy here of Uncanny X-Men 268. Also from Uncanny X-Men, we have issue 288 with cover art by Andy Kubert featuring Bishop, one of the early Bishop appearances here. And I did buy multiples of some of these books just because they were so cheap. And as I was adding them to my cart, I'm like, if I'm going to buy one for $1, $2, $3, why not just buy all of them? And so that's what I ended up doing. So you'll see a number of these come through as dupes. Next is Uncanny X-Men 290. I've always loved this cover by Whilce Portacio featuring Storm. This one to me looks a little faded. Like the blues and purples in the backgrounds almost just look a bit pale. I don't know. Nice strong copy though. Looks to be in great shape otherwise, but I'm a little worried about just overall color loss on that one. Next is Uncanny X-Men 318. This one, I think I bought 4 copies. I did. There's technically a direct and then a deluxe, but ended up getting 4 of these from Parman at a great deal. Joe Mad on cover art on this one with Terry Austin inking. And I would say this one is probably borderline with the new CGC fees. So if these were all 9.8 candidates, I don't know if I send them in for pressing and for CGC grading. Like I said, if I'm using that kind of $40 threshold now, what is this in a CGC 9.8? Are you paying $60 for this? $50? You paying more? It's going to be one of those where I have to tweak my decision engine logic. I have no idea how this one got in my order. This is Vampirella number 3. This is the second series of Vampirella. Now it seems like they reboot her series twice a year. But when this was officially her second series, I ended up picking this up. This is a cover art by Mike Mayhew. And I must have clicked add to cart on accident on this one. I don't even remember how that one got in there. All right, now the next two books I would consider to be a little bit out of the ordinary in terms of the books that I would typically buy from Parman. I'm looking for, somewhere around like the $1 to $5 range for a lot of these books, and I decided to take a chance just because I felt like with this seller being one of the sellers with the highest average raw grade, when I grade these books, I go ahead and I keep a running ledger of all of my books that I purchase, but then I aggregate by seller to figure out average grade and how many books are ended up getting a CGC 9.8, so that I can kind of figure out which sellers I want to buy from more frequently to get the best results. And so I bought a couple of Werewolf by Night books. This is Werewolf by Night number 14, cover art by Mike Plug, and a lovely 20-cent cover here. And it looks to be in pretty good shape. So these were all listed on Atomic Avenue as near mint. And yeah, it looks quite nice. Corner looks pretty decent. Edges look pretty good. So hopefully as I rebag and board these, I'll take them out, grade them, and hopefully there's not too much going on with the back cover. And then this one was a little bit more of a splurge than Werewolf 14. This is Werewolf by Night number 2. Has the awesome Bronze Age picture frame, cover design again by Mike Plug. And I mean, I don't even have to look at it more than a couple of seconds to tell you this is not near mint. So this is something that I deal with. This is my risk for holding on to these orders for a year. I cannot in good faith contact Parman and say, hey man, this book is a 6.0 and you listed it in near mint and I paid what I thought was near mint fair market value. This has no chance of getting anywhere. Probably the highest it would ever be would be like a VF minus. This is probably somewhere in the 6 to 7 range at best. And I know that I'm taking that risk. I have to deal with it. And it's just a loss. It was a mistake. If Werewolf 14 turns out to be a 9.8 candidate, well, then I look like a genius. So it all kind of evens out. Like, it's all a risk. And I add to the risk by letting these orders sit around. I understand that. But that's just kind of the trade-off. This one is another one that could have been hit or miss. This is Invaders number 7. This is interesting because this is the first appearance of Union Jack. He appears on the cover of the next issue, and I think it's just a better cover with Union Jack right in the middle. And this is the first appearance of that character. It's also first appearance of Baron Blood. He's right here on the cover. But again, it is not near mint. The corner is folded over, you can see right there. And then also right here by the staple, there's too much stress here by the staple right there. So not a 9.8 candidate. This corner also suffering from a little bit of softening or tearing there. So that's unfortunate. But this is another book that, I want to gamble and take a chance on, because if it is truly a 9.8 candidate, then there's some good upside there. Then there's a run of Fantastic Four that I love. This is the Art Adams new Fantastic Four, where it features the Hulk, Wolverine, Ghost Rider, and Spider-Man. And this is issue 349 of Fantastic Four, and I got a bunch of these. I think I got 4. Yep, 4 of these. And the reason I do this is because not only are these like super, super cheap, but I try to get them where maybe a newsstand copy slips in. Atomic Avenue just recently started breaking out direct versus newsstand, but I think at the time I made this purchase, they didn't. And so what the seller would do is they would put in the description newsstand, or they wouldn't bother, and they would just mix direct and newsstand. And so I would just buy, not that buying 4 copies is buying in bulk, but I would buy more than 1 copy in hopes that one would be a newsstand. But it looks like everything's kind of correcting itself, so that little loophole is now closed. Here's Fantastic Four 348. This is the first cover appearance, although looking at 347, characters are in the background, so I don't know about that, but they're definitely on the cover. I'll give it that. But awesome Art Adams cover here featuring those 4 characters. And I remember I got a newsstand copy from Parman not too long ago, so I thought I would take another shot at it. But these are probably falling in that category of books that I might pass on now instead of sending them off to CGC if they're a 9.8. But it depends on what my decision engine says after I factor in the price increases. And then for Fantastic Four 347, I bought 2 copies of it. Again, as I mentioned, I was doing this to try and get newsstands, and I think all 8 of my FF books were direct copies. Perfectly fine. Really cool. Art Adams, Art to Bear on cover art here. Really interesting 3-issue run of Fantastic Four that I always pick up. Next is Catwoman 52. In this issue, it features the death of the Black Mask, which is cool because he's in her goggles right there. Awesome cover art by Adam Hughes. And this one looks to be really, really nice, going up and down the spine. So if this were Werewolf by Night number 2, then I'd be having a different conversation in my head about CGC and comic book values, but unfortunately that book is probably a fine or a fine minus. This looks to be at minimum near mint, if not a 9.8 candidate at first glance. So super cool Adam Hughes cover on Catwoman 52. And the last book I picked up from Parman, Amazing Spider-Man 294. This is part of the Kraven's Last Hunt story arc. This is part 5. And in this issue, Kraven is, as we like to say in my household, he's defeated, because especially in comic books, death is just a setback. So he is defeated in this issue. Really awesome set of Mike Zeck covers if you're collecting the entire 6-part saga. And this looks to be pretty good. There's some weird marking here by the staple. Not sure what that is. It could just be a little bit of a printing issue, but looks very, very nice otherwise. So really nice Amazing Spider-Man 294 that I picked up from Parman. Great set of books. A little disappointed. I keep thinking about that Werewolf by Night number 2 and the condition there. But that's kind of what I do. Invaders as well. Invaders number 7, also not near mint. Cool nonetheless. That's the oldest werewolf book I own. I don't have number 1, obviously. So really nice to add that 20-cent cover. And then 14 might be a nice gem. This Vampirella, I don't even know. I'm not sure. I might have to put this in a different pile. Let me show you what I paid for these books so you can see what my total cost was and then how the total cost compares to fair market value. And if I were to get these books graded, am I adding any additional value to my collection? Let's check it out. Okay, here is the order summary for the order that I placed with Atomic Avenue from the seller Parman on January 4th, 2025. I was invoiced $270.50. Most of that is driven by the $102 I spent on Werewolf by Night number 2. It brings me pain as I'm even saying those words out loud because I would not spend $100 on that book in that condition. I don't know if I'd spend $20 on that book in that condition. So I'm a little annoyed. Again, not with Parman, not with the selling experience or the marketplace, just with myself. But that's what I choose to do. I take a risk. You know, I could have bought 50 more Uncanny X-Men 318s, and I don't know if I would have been any happier or disappointed. But just explaining where that big total came from. One nice thing about ordering from this particular seller, no tax, no shipping, so the price that you see on the platform is the price that you pay. Now, you can see that a number of these I got for under $2. Fantastic Four $3.49 I got for $1.15, and $3.48 $2, $3.47 $1.85, and so on. The more expensive ones, Amazing Spider-Man 294 at $16. Invader 7 also at $35. Just those 2 alone, if I could, just send them back or go back in time and not order them, this order would look a lot better. Uncanny X-Men 268, $22. Around $20 for a high-grade copy of that, I think, is pretty good. Hopefully that one ends up being the 9.8 candidate I'm looking for. And $35 for Werewolf by Night number 14. I will say that that's around the price that I would pay for Mile High Comics after the discount. Maybe 28, 27, somewhere around there. But in that $25 to $35 range is where I'm buying those books when they're available. That one from 1974 is just going to miss that modern submission. So it is going to be a vintage submission, which, as we know from the opening, it's going to be more expensive. All right, now if I were to compare these books to the cover price fair market value, then what I want to find out is if I left all of these books raw, just as is, and I took the cover price fair market value of the raw value across the board, across all grades, I would stand to gain about $117.50 of value to my collection. The high grade fair market value of Werewolf number 2 is 114, but if I plugged in a grade of, like, let's say 6.5, yeah, it drops way down. And you see $55. It's just it's a huge loss. What I was hoping for is it was a 9.4 because it was near mint, right? Then you buy it for 100, slab it, it's worth 400, right? Easy, but not so easy. Yes, I should have asked for a scan. Yes, I'm a terrible collector, but these are the things that I do. These are the mistakes that I make. I punish myself for them, but I also have a number of wins in here, I think, when it comes to condition, particularly the Werewolf 14. Now, let's plug in the grades for all of these books just so we can have more of a conversation around why I did buy what I bought. And while the fair market value of these are, roughly what I paid, if I were to send them all to CGC and they were graded, I would stand to add, well, $456 of fair market value. Let me just do this. Let's just give it a 6.5. And then also the Invaders book. That one, let's just say 8.5, roughly. And now we can see if they're all 9.4 straight away, then this is kind of a break even. And this $49, this is the price increase. So the new prices are not in here yet. They're not in my formulas. So this is the older, the pre-January 6, 2025 prices. But what I was saying is if I send a 15 book submission, because 15 is usually the number, I send between 12 and 15, then at a $3 increase, it's $45. Here it is $49. So this took what would be a very, very small marginal add of value to my collection if all of these books got 9.4, except for Invaders and Werewolf 2. But now this $49 goes away. And now you have to be even more precise with where you spend your money and what books you spend them on. Now, what is fun for me, and I'll do this very quickly and then set the Invaders and the Werewolf book back to their grades, is what if all of these books were 9.8? So let's do this, flip them all to 9.8, and just for fun, we'll leave it for a second. Yeah, $4,800 of value from this order. That's not happening. Let's move this to 6.5 and put this back to 8.5. And I just realized I had a Tomb of Dracula 51 because I didn't see it in the order, but I had it here, and now the numbers are skewed. I apologize for that. I removed it. So real quick, some of the FMVs and the CGC totals are a little messed up now, but I did fix them. $1,766 if I were to get 9.8s on all the books except for Invaders and Werewolf 2. The 9.8 of Werewolf 14 is $532. So if that book ends up turning out as a 9.8, I look like a super comic book nerd genius. That's great. But what you didn't see, well, I guess you did see my huge whiff on Werewolf 2. But I do this where I'm buying quantity because that way I can take the hits and the misses together and overall still have a positive outcome. Because if you add the two books together, it cost me $137, and the CGC values of these books are around $587. So then, yeah, if you have to buy the 6.5 to get the 9.8 of the 14, again, I'm just kind of making things up at this point, but hopefully you understand my point, is that I try to blanket an order like this. Now, let's take a look at some of the others real quick. Vampirella number 3, $153 for that book in a 9.8. The X-Men 318, I think I put them... I think they all have the same... Yeah, I didn't distinguish deluxe from regular, so I just put the regular version price at $138 for that in a 9.8. X-Men 290, 107, that's the Storm cover. 288 early Bishop, $53. So even in a 9.8 with the price increase, that one's not going to make it. X-Men 268, the Jim Lee cover, over $200 in a 9.8. So hopefully that one ends up grading out. And then some of these FF books here, again, it's borderline, right? At $1.15, sure, my entry point from the book is just non-existent. You're basically just thinking about pressing fees, grading fees, and now that everything is more expensive, you're going to end up paying about $57 to have this book pressed and graded and shipped all around and sent back to you. It's going to cost you $60 probably for something like that. So these books are going to the $349 anyway. Like I said, I was really buying them, hoping a newsstand copy would slip in there. Fantastic Four, $348. That one's over $100. The newsstand is a touch more valuable, but still the direct's getting over $100 is a nice sign. 347 drops back to 58, so those are just solid high-grade keepers in my personal collection. Catwoman 52 and a 9.8, only $72. That one's going to be a borderline submission if it is a 9.8 candidate. Amazing Spider-Man 294 at 190, really nice 9.8 value for that book, where it was only a $16 buy-in for that one. So lots of numbers, lots of Fantastic Four comics there. I have a number of trains of thought happening all at once. I'm still fixated on the condition of a couple of those books and really disappointed. Like I said, as a buyer, I'm not going to reach out to the seller. If I open this order up, a week or two after I placed the order on January 4th, well, then maybe it's a different story. Maybe I reach out to them and just say, hey, is there something you can do? Sometimes the sellers will offer you like a little bit of a discount in place of like a full refund. But if I'm at a show or I'm bidding on eBay, I'm not touching either of those books in that condition. I'm just moving on. But it's a seller that I trust. It's a seller that I've picked up books from before. And frankly, between ASM 294, X-Men 268, and Werewolf 14, those three alone, if I know it's but if they all get 9.8s, then this whole order is worthwhile. And maybe I could go ahead and post Werewolf by Night and Vader 7 online for auction. When I do post raw books online, I choose eBay, and I am in the middle of completely rebuilding how I post books on eBay and how I use my spreadsheets as kind of the back end for that process. I had a little bit of an automated process, but I had abandoned it, I want to say back in April. I had just shut it off. And now I'm redoing it where it's a little bit more of a model that will decay the price over time, but then automatically convert it to an auction and list it at auction for a very low minimal entry bid. Because I want to start to pare down my collection, and I don't need 4 copies of Fantastic Four 349. And also, spoiler alert, I've bought multiple copies of FF 349 from Parman in the past, so I must have at least a dozen copies of that book. And I don't need them, and I still think for $1, it was a good pickup. Fair market value is about $5. So these are the kind of books that I would probably put on eBay at auction and start them pretty low. And I'm rebuilding that as part of my data platform, where I have more data that is becoming kind of the engine for a lot of the things that I'm developing now. And I'm developing them a lot quicker in terms of just building out things for comic book marketplaces, apps, and so forth with this index data platform. Okay, that was a lot. If you have any comments or feedback about CGC, the price hikes, I'm sure the initial emotional response is, I'm never using CGC again, or CGC, you're shooting yourself in the foot, people are going to go to PSA. Feel free to leave a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm going to keep using CGC. I just am not going to send as many books to them as I would, just because it's not worth the trouble or the money. And if you have any thoughts about how I did with this order, please let me know as well. Thanks for watching, happy collecting, and see you next time.